Hello there. We're live.
Hey,
It's on.
it's scary watching that countdown.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too much this time. I was really that was my favorite intro music. I was dancing away for sure.
Because now anything can happen.
Yeah, once you're live, it gets scary. Also, I've just had a cup of coffee and it's like 9 o'clock, so I'm really like feeling a little bit pumped, stroke jittery. So it should be interesting chat
Oh
for
wow,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah,
I don't have coffee after like 3 p.m. But because it's about 9 a.m., I've already done coffee, but now I'm having like hot lemon stuff because it's good for my throat.
nice. Well, you're such a professional. You're doing like
Nah, not
throat
really.
exercises, the
Not
awesomeness, and
really. No,
utterly shaped feet.
I just have asthma and things like that. So
That's
yeah, it's just easier to try and keep everything moving. And I do
that's far more
apologize. I
sensible
don't know
than
if
I
you can
said.
hear it, but my puppy's just started to go a bit crazy with a squeak toy near the room. So hopefully that's not coming through.
That's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine. Noises, children noises, background noises, we're all used to them by now. Anyway, mate, do you want to do a bit of introduction to yourself about who you are, your background, and all that kind of stuff, and then we can learn
Yeah,
about
geez.
you.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. I'm a long time listener, first time caller to this. I've been really enjoying these. So it's like, what would I say if I were on? So yeah, hi, I'm Daniel. I am male, 41 years old, living in New Zealand.
New Zealand.
Originally from the UK. So I've been in New Zealand now for about 15 years. I've been working in a number of different industries, but mostly in the BI and data space for probably about the last 12 to 13 years.
All right.
Um, Playing with Power BI for probably about 6 or 7 years of that. And I guess that leads me to today. I can elaborate further, but I try and keep it
That's
light, being as I've been in my career now for like 20 odd years.
yeah.
So we
It
can
was.
elaborate whatever you like.
I will start. I'm curious whereabouts in the UK you're from, because I mean, you moved. You said you moved to New Zealand 15 years ago. I moved to Berlin,
Yeah,
2006, roughly the same time. So
yeah,
maybe
yeah. I'm from I guess the Midlands would be the easiest way to say it. So the nearest city would be Birmingham.
okay.
But I was born, for anyone who is familiar with the UK, I was born in Gainsborough, which is near Lincoln. I lived in Stoke-on-Trent for a good number of years before moving to Nuneaton, which is near Birmingham. Then Northampton and Milton Keynes for a bit. Then back to Nuneaton and Hinckley, which is around the Leicestershire area, and then to New Zealand.
Wow.
So a little bit of a mixed bag. So I picked up a lot
That's
of regional accents as a kid.
yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I was this. I mean, I'm generally bad with accents because I'm tone deaf. But I couldn't pick up any sort of accent from you, which is
No one
where the
ever really
question
could.
came. Yeah, yeah.
It kind of blended out. When my voice broke, it kind of just went monotonous. And oh my god, Kerry was in the Nuneaton for
Curious.
a while. That's a very
Okay,
small world.
that is very small world.
We've never talked about that.
So and see, you had to come on this show to learn. I called it a show. Is it a show? You had to come on this live stream to learn about your
To learn
shared
that
towns.
we've been geographic neighbors, possibly not at the same time, but
Yeah,
that's another thing we have in common.
maybe there's something about Nuneaton in the water that inspires awesome visualization. Maybe this is
I don't know. They have
something.
fluoride.
Okay, that's what it is. Fluoride for sure. And Lincoln. Okay, someone was following someone here.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Oddly, I'm just down the road from New Zealand's Lincoln as well.
All right, there you go.
Move halfway around the world to be in a town that's very similar to the town I was born in. Not similar,
Okay.
but name-wise,
Yeah,
you get
yeah,
the idea.
yeah, yeah. Be like me moving to Newcastle in Australia, perhaps. I've never been to Newcastle in Australia. I'm not sure what it's like.
I don't know.
Anyway,
I don't know what we have in here. Definitely have one in Australia, but
yeah. Well, I moved from Newcastle to Berlin, so my accent didn't get quite as mixed. The only thing that changed for me was I had to learn to speak a lot slower because no one could understand a word that I was saying. But there is still elements of speed there, especially when I talk about Power BI. I get like really excited because I'm a nerd. So when I give like trainings and stuff, I got to say, look, especially when it's like with a German native speaker, I'm like, just if I speak too fast, just tell me to shut up, tell me to calm down, tell me to slow down.
yeah,
Um,
that's kind of the problem with this field. You get excited about stuff, you start talking and monologuing, and before you know it, like 20 minutes has gone by and everyone's left the room. But
exactly, it's very true. And then at some point through all this journey, you well, of course, we're going to talk about Denner, right? I always say we're not going to. It's unscripted and unplanned, and we're going to talk about
the
random
elephant
stuff. We
in the
talk about
room.
you, yeah, the elephant in the room. And you said, I love Vega Light so much that I'm going to create something and name it after a constellation. And then, one second, let's clear this up from the start. Is it Deneb or Deneb.
I thought it was pronounced Graham, but you guys are surprising me. Honestly, if you want to get pedantic about it, it's Deneb. But I say all kinds of different things because it depends which, going back to how excited we are in conversation, sometimes I enunciate the wrong syllables.
Yeah.
I kind of
Yeah.
like that Jeff had the funny accent over the end, so it would be like Denyeb, which I
Deneb.
thought was quite good.
Yeah, I can live
But
with that. It's a happy
but
compromise.
no, it's technically just Deneb.
Okay.
But I don't worry too much about it. It's not
No, no.
like a brand I'm protecting or anything.
I wasn't going to change my pronunciation for sure because I've said Deneb so many times now that I just couldn't. It's like same with obviously with PBix, right? For me, it's a PBix, and everyone says, "See,
Yeah,
ha,
see, it's interesting, right? You've got the
Deneb."
PBIX versus PBIX, but with custom visuals, the file names are longer. So I kind of have this weird portmanteau of spelling it out, but also shortening it. So I say
Mm,
PBIViz because it's I can't find a good way of saying it eloquently.
yeah.
So I kind of split it into letters and a syllable.
It always frustrated me in like the early days of people like saying websites. People would always like say the W part, and I say the W part because it's so frustrating that it's literally the longest letter in the English alphabet. WWW takes so long to say, and it's so stupid.
Yeah, one thing that always
WWW.
amazed me was here in the Antipodes or this area of the world, we say dub dub dub, which I think is
Dub.
quite cool.
Yeah. I met an American person once who said trip dub, and I was like, that's pretty cool. Like,
That's I like that.
yeah, trip dub. But
Dub
then
dub.
times changed, and no one said www since about I think 2002 maybe, I'm not sure. So yeah, life becomes easier.
There's a really good. You're from the UK, so I don't know if you ever listen to Radio One much, but
Not for a while, but yeah,
yeah, but Scott Mills, the DJ.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he's got a pretty good day where he just plays sound bites, and people ask for their favorite sound bites to be played. And this is a really good one of Pete Tong, who was a
Pete Tong,
pretty
yeah.
good, you probably know who Pete Tong is. But when the internet was like relatively new, and they were reading out his website
Hmm.
on the show, and it was like this really long, rambling run-on sentence where he's like, https://w, and it just went on and on for minutes, and it's like that's not convenient.
Oh, class, love it. Hey, Oscar, HTML visualization rocks.
Thank you.
Does.
That's very kind.
Yeah,
It does.
he's
It,
correct.
it does what it says, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's fantastic stuff. So you've been working in this field for 20 years, and then at some point you just went, how did that? Where did this come from? Where did I will create Deneb and it will be awesome? Where did that come from?
I think history-wise, some of us can remember when Power BI was called Power BI for Office 365, and it was all in Excel. So you had like Power View, Power
Mm,
Query, Power Pivot, and Power View was this kind of it's what sucked me in because it was the first attempt at the visual layer, and it was written in Silverlight. That didn't
mm,
matter, and it had this really neat interactive clicky draggy droppy thing, right? So it's very similar to what you see in Power BI now,
mm.
but it was like you drag fields in, they get pivoted and various other things. I'm going somewhere with it.
Take your
One of
time.
the
It's all good.
features they had with the visuals you couldn't really do much in terms of customizing them,
Mm,
but one of the things I had was the ability to tile, which is basically small multiples.
okay.
And when Power BI moved to how we know it in about 2015,
Mm,
there wasn't really any feature parity there. They pretty much moved everything across from Power View within about 6 months, and small multiples never happened.
mm,
And I really, really wanted them, and I put up with it for years. And custom visuals came out pretty quickly after Power BI went sort of GA.
mm,
And I thought, cool, that's something someone else can worry about.
mm, mm,
Um, but it got to about 2018, I think, and I was just trying to use report techniques that weren't there. Small multiples still weren't there. It was a couple of
true.
years,
True.
wasn't going to turn up, and no one really developed. There were some visuals that had it, so there were some commercial visuals, but I wanted to really have a lot of control over what I wanted. So I
Mm,
thought, okay, I'm going to have to learn how to write these things because they were always something somebody else wrote. I would wait for people to do things, but it just wouldn't come along. So, and I had a little bit of web development experience. I'd done stuff in D3 and tools like that that are used for a lot of online visual stuff.
yeah.
So I basically just sat down and begrudgingly learned how to do it. So my
Wow.
first visual was called the small multiple line chart, And eventually it got to a point where I thought I could probably push this a bit further and put it in AppSource, and maybe some other people could benefit from it.
Mm.
What you don't realize is the difference between building a visual for you and building a visual that works for everybody as well as it possibly can. So you can get a visual working pretty quickly, but to actually kind of productize it, and it's really hard. It adds so much time to the development cycle. And that was a hard lesson to learn. And you've got to have an infinite amount of patience for that stuff. And it wasn't a great visual, but it did what I wanted, and some other people liked it, and I kind of chipped away at it. But what you sort of learn is it's quite a big discipline to change from what we conventionally do in the BI space, right? So we do DAX and we do M, and we can dive into those and play around with them. We've got some brilliant people in the community that can do amazing stuff with DAX, right? Same thing with M. But with visuals, you're kind of stuck unless you want to be a web developer. And anytime, like I was kind of just getting more and more into it at this point. So I did the Violin Plot, which is another visual I did. And that was another one which I could prototype in about 10 hours, but it took about 150 hours to make it, something some other people could use.
Yeah.
So this stuff really kind of racks up. And then every now and again, I get requests from people to build them custom visuals for money.
Wow,
which
okay.
was an exciting prospect.
I can imagine.
But the thing is when you actually quote that up for somebody, they're like, yeah, I don't want to spend that much money.
No.
So then at that point, you're like, well, okay, firstly, if I were to monetize this, I basically just gave up doing work for money for custom visuals. So I don't really do that much these days, unless it's really, good. But what I sort of realized was that there's plenty of other languages that we could use in the visual layer that aren't quite as low level as JavaScript and needing to know HTML and CSS and that kind of thing. And there's so many people that are so creative and they don't want to worry about that. So that, I had a look around, and I was aware of Vega Lite, and I thought this is a really good fit because most data people can kind of get their head around JSON.
Yeah.
If you work with web services and a lot of modern systems, you kind of know what JSON looks like.
Yeah. Good point.
And it's just a really neat way of being able to kind of prescribe how visual works. And I was into Charticulator at this point, and we were seeing visual grammar become a thing. Really, it's been in Tableau for a while. It's been in R for a while with ggplot. But Vega Lite and Vega are just really good languages. They're built by awesome people way smarter than I am, way better in this space than I am. But I can bring it across. So the thought was to how do I really reduce the time between iterating in a totally different tool like Visual Studio Code, building a visual, testing a visual, where I could just build a visual inside Power BI like the R or Python visuals, get feedback immediately, and let people that are more creative than me and don't rely on me as a gatekeeper to, because I write the code and you have to live with my development, right? I develop something the way I think it should work. And I'm not Zebra BI, who have amazing knowledge in this space and actually can really do amazing stuff. But I can help people in other ways. So my goal, and to be honest, I played around with the idea of making an editor for it in, Power BI. Like basically what we see today is the product of about 18 to 20 months of development and dead ends and various other things. But I did a user group with Discovery AI, who I think you probably know, Alice and Christian from Discovery AI.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love their work. It's cool stuff.
Yeah. So they asked me to do a little spot on custom visuals in general. And I'd had a brief, sort of acquaintanceship with Kerry before that. She'd reached out to me and said she was doing some stuff with HTML content, and it was really, really impressive. So we ended up speaking at the same meetup. And at the end of my section, which was first, I just did, here's this thing I'm working on. And I just showed a very basic, put a Vega Lite thing in and you get a visual. And I think she just reached out afterwards and said, I really want to be able to do that. So it's basically thanks to her that I've put up with it, because it's been a really, really long and arduous journey. But I'm really glad to see where it's going. You're picking it up, other people are picking it up. It's got a hashtag. It's pretty cool.
I can imagine. It must be very cool. I think Jeff said this, that you gave up doing something for money to do something for free instead.
People don't want to spend money on visuals unless they're really, 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 really good.
Yeah.
And I understand that. But I'm a single person doing wearing all the hats. I'm doing the development, the
Mm.
testing,
Mm.
the product management, the documentation, the promotion. Hopefully other people will do that for me. But
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
lot to do, and I'm not an entrepreneur. So I'm very happy doing what I'm doing. I
Mm.
like problem solving. A lot of us do.
That's the thing. Yeah.
And
Yeah. If it's
I,
something
I
that if
like I like being there. I'm not
yeah.
looking to build an empire. I just want to give people
Yeah.
the ability to do more, and I enjoy that.
Yeah.
That's my kind of selfish part, is that I enjoy that. So I don't mind that it's free.
Yeah.
But I have enough work to do that's
Yeah.
not visual related. I do a lot of work. I work with Discovery Eye a couple days a week. I
Mm.
have the odd jobs here in the data space that are outside the visual layer. Sometimes
Mm.
they're inside the visual layer, but I'm just happy working in Power BI
Yeah.
mostly.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
I'm
last week.
fortunate that I can free up enough time to work on tools like Deneb and give them to
Yeah.
people.
Sure. No, I remember I was speaking last week, and we're talking about like the joy of doing your job and to be able to create something and do something that impacts a huge number of people. And it must be really satisfying to obviously spend so much time on something, but to really see it used and to see it actually work and see
Well,
it work well. I can
well,
imagine it
yeah,
must be quite satisfying.
yeah, it is, because basically I built this thing as a way for me to shortcut my time down, because I was using Vega a lot, and I thought it must be easier to automate this a little bit.
Yeah.
And I found that it was working for me.
Hmm.
And it just, I kind of developed it basically on the premise that Kerry was going to use it and I was going to use it. And there were
That's pretty
probably a couple
cool.
of times between, I think it was December, yeah, it was not December just gone, but December before, we talked about it briefly.
Hmm.
And April, when I actually put it out in the preview. And I think there's probably a couple of times where I said, look, I just don't think anyone's going to use this. I can't be bothered. And I don't know if
Hmm.
I said that out loud, but we had enough conversations about how it was going for me to feel that I could push along with it and
Hmm.
somebody might find it useful. I'm
Yeah.
just really grateful that there are people that
Hmm.
that can that are happy to work in that layer. They sort of
Yeah.
get that we take away the UI,
Hmm.
but we bring you closer to the middle. I've used this diagram a few times in a couple of
Yeah.
presentations, but we don't want to have you fully coding. But if you can accept that you can just roll your sleeves up a bit and
Hmm.
you're not constrained by UI, in that case, it's kind of filling a gap. I think you've got Charticulator, you've got other
Hmm.
visuals that give you a UI with lots of control, but there's still some constraints there. You're still
Yeah.
reliant on developers to give you the functionality you need,
Sure.
and I
Sure.
kind of want to sit in that domain a little bit more. So I use Charticulator still. I use
Okay.
most of the tools on the spectrum, but for me, it just fills in that gap quite nicely, and I'm glad that there are other people that are keen on that.
Yeah. I mean, for me, actually, I find it quite interesting that I enjoy it as much as I do, because before using Deneb, probably the only custom visual I'd ever used or used frequently, I tried plenty and never really got any sort of joy out of them, or never really thought they'd added enough to actually use them. The only one I really used was Chiclet Slicer, because I think it's awesome. I really do. I think it's a
Yeah, I
great
mean,
visual.
that's a really good one,
Yeah.
and I
But
probably had a pool of maybe 5 or 6 that I pretty
mm,
much used religiously. So
yeah.
a lot of the OKViz ones I used
Yeah. Okay.
quite a lot, and some of the Microsoft ones, the Power KPI, KPI Matrix,
Mm,
they were both pretty much on my, before we could pin visuals. They were the visuals that I always had to hand.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think I like the idea of being able to. The other thing as well is if you build a visual and certify it, it's really hard. So the idea is that one thing I would do with clients is develop my visual privately, but
Mm,
they want the benefits of certification, but you can't do that
mm,
until you publish to the store. And
yeah.
they didn't want to publish to the store, and they didn't want to go through the certification.
Yeah.
So the other thing with Deneb was like, yeah, I've got to be able to make sure that it's certified so that it gives you
Sure.
almost like a runtime that your design can still work in a certified way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's lots of things to think about. But yeah, I
Mm,
custom visuals are they're a bit Marmite, to coin an expression that you might be familiar with, but you either love it or hate it, I think.
yeah.
Um,
I think
I
I
just
don't
think
know.
they're a tool. They're not like, when you hammer everything looks like a nail kind of thing. But used well, they can really help.
I think for me, it was just the fact that if I was going to use one, it would have to be really add something specifically very, very good. And there are a large number of custom viz that you use them, but you have to, of course, buy a license fee, and that's out of my hands for the job that I do. If basically if someone wants to pay for that, they can, but I tend to not use them for that reason. I had a colleague a few years ago back in my previous company. We were building and creating some reports, and he said to me, he said, "Oh, okay, so let's just build a visualization, Ben. And I like laughed in his face. It's like, yeah, okay, let's just do that. Like, no problem. Let's just build a visualization. But it's amazing now that essentially with Deneb, you kind of can do that. You can, the I think as it says in the description of Deneb, it's this bespoke visualization tool. It's fantastic. And
Yeah.
it's,
I
I mean,
stole that from Vega and Altair.
I gotta say, I think I haven't had this much fun in Power BI in a long time. Just open it up and to really get into it. And obviously, it's really fun to learn something new. And I'd never heard of Vega or Vega Lite before I opened Deneb. I'd never heard of it at all.
No, it's
So,
funny. Not a lot of people have, but the people
mm,
that have built it are incredibly well known within the data viz industry.
yeah,
You know, and
okay,
I think people have probably come across the tooling in things like Altair, which is the Python
yeah,
layer
okay,
for Vega Lite, and a lot of other people like Kibana, which is a kind of um, like a monitoring sort of tool. They have the ability to
okay,
write Vega specs inside their tool, so you can visualize usage data and things like that.
okay.
It's become quite common, but it just seems like a really good fit for people that don't want to be full on developers, but just want to be able to build something iteratively. And
Yeah,
that's the fun part for me is you start with an idea
mm,
and you kind of evolve it as you
yeah,
learn more about the data, which is kind of almost like what we do with modeling sometimes. Like sometimes we start with how a model should look. You know, I'm back from, I'm old school, Kimball trained, star schemas, that kind of thing. So,
mm,
when I started to learn, I was taught how to, design star schemas properly with all the right requirements gathering and stuff. But sometimes when you build a model, you can almost have an organic path. And I think that's kind of a cool thing with visuals too. And that was something I liked with Charticulator, was that you could start to play around with what works and what doesn't and throw it away or change it to a
okay,
different shape or,
yeah,
and that's what I really like about those languages.
yeah.
You have quite a lot of power to be as simple or as complex, or you can get lost in it.
Yeah, I think
Likewise, you can have something working pretty quickly.
I mean, with regards to learning stuff, I always find it depends on the person, how that person's brain works. But for me, there's something about using, I mean, I'll say Vega Lite because I'm not using Vega, I'm using Vega Lite. Yeah. So using Vega Lite with Deneb, that, as you say, it is iterative. So I can start with something very basic and then just add a little bit of this here and a little bit of that there. And it becomes something either a little bit different or very different. But again, you can, with that complete control and just adding little bits of code
Yeah.
here and there, you can really, I think that is a great thing for learning as well. Because you can start off and it's like you're watching your knowledge grow as
Yeah.
you actually build. And I think it's quite satisfying to learn because of that.
Yeah. And I was talking to somebody recently and they sort of explained that they see some applications for it as a teaching tool because, and I have an intro, I've got a pretty boilerplate intro to how you build a bar chart from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's almost like the lead into how you would do it in Vega Lite, because it when you want to build a visual, it's basically shaped on a page bound data, for lack of a better word
Fair enough. Yeah.
or phrase. It's more about how that gets moved around and encoded. And, Vega Lite just does such a good job of it. Vega's kind of between JavaScript and Vega Lite, but
Yeah.
there's just such a good level of spectrum.
Yeah.
Oh, Jeff is really trying to make that N a thing, isn't he?
He is. He's going for it. But you could build a multi-visual page just using Deneb, right? Yeah, I
If you
suppose.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the Vega Lite team, their intro presentation to it, they demonstrated being able to combine different charts in the same. They call them views.
Mm.
Um, you can use in addition to being able to layer on top of each other, you can have concatenation.
Yeah.
So you can actually build grids with different visuals in.
Yeah.
If you
That's
wanted
cool.
to, you could write interactions between those visuals, but they wouldn't necessarily work with other visuals in Power BI, which is
Mm.
where we're trying to focus efforts. We maybe one day there'll be more than me, but we're trying to focus on how things like cross filtering work between
Mm.
Vega Lite, which is different to how Power BI does it.
Mm.
That the tricky bit is to get the integration right. So there are some cool features of Vega and Vega Lite that we may not be able to implement, but you could certainly build if you wanted to, you could put a single visual on a page and cram a whole bunch of stuff in. The thing you got to think about though with that is, particularly in Power BI, you can only put a single data set into a visual
Yeah.
container.
Yeah.
Visuals only have a single query, and you've got to think about your Vega Lite visual, then a
Mm.
visual as a table visual.
Yeah.
So you got to try and visualize that. But then if you can make that table work, and let's just say you have different granularities in there, as long as you understand the granularities. So for instance, let's say you've got a fact table and a dimension table,
Mm.
and you combine them together, the dimensions will get repeated all the way down, just like they do in a table.
Mm.
But you could use transforms to pull out the first row for the dimension values,
Yeah.
And I can't. A project I'm working on at the minute uses a similar approach, where
Mm.
we've been able to build a very rich visual from a data set that looks complicated, but actually drives a very, very complicated visual, all in one query. And it's quite cool.
That's very cool.
And that's, for me, that's the ultimate thing, is being able to do stuff where you kind of start out with an idea and you just don't know if it's possible. And then just through some thought around the modeling as well, the data
Yeah.
drives the whole thing, but also then being able to apply things like transforms and aggregates inside the visual as well,
Mm.
where they may not make sense to do in the data model, but in a visual, they make sense. You can do some pretty neat stuff.
Yeah. Nice.
And that's really exciting.
It's really interesting to talk about this sort of thing because I'm still on a very basic level as I'm learning. So I tend to like learn something, I enjoy it, make a video, and then I'll go again. So I just when I
See, that's where I fall flat. You see, I do something, learn it, and then maybe write some code, but don't really share it, and probably rely on other people like yourself and Kerry and Jose, it's good to see him on here as well. He's doing amazing work. You should check his videos out.
Yeah, I saw that. I checked out the other day. Actually, it was quite cool. I still think that some of the most, I mean, the ones that I saw first, and I think I watched you. You did a couple. You did 2 videos from, is it SQL? Yeah, SQL bit. No, Power BI tips or something like with Mike
Yeah,
and
we did a couple of.
yeah,
We're trying to do a few more. So Mike Hollow.
yeah.
He did. He'd been using Charticulator since its inception,
Oh,
but he kind of came back to it when it became a visual, and almost did like an exploration as if he were new to it.
okay.
And he doesn't have that same exposure to the neb, which is really cool, because he's able to come at it much like
Yeah.
yourself, much like other people.
Mm.
You come in completely uninitiated and you can start to discover it. So his premise is that he's just got me in on a couple of videos
Yeah,
to
they're
help.
good. I enjoyed them. They're cool videos.
Thank you.
They're really helpful. And also on those videos, Mike mentioned the cards that Kerry created, which you get those cards when you download the documentation. I love those
Free
cards.
cards.
Yeah, free cards, exactly. I mean, I love them, and I checked them, and I kind of use them as learning tools. I kind of did something the wrong around, though. I kind of started, and I was like, okay, so I have this document, I have this thing that I've downloaded. Let's see if I can take some of Carrie's stuff, like just like copy it, and then like try and make changes to understand it. But it was so much further than my level of knowledge. I got so lost, and I was just kind of like, you're doing the wrong thing, man. You got to start at the start. Don't start at 10 months from now, 11 months from now.
I
But
think
very
I
cool.
think we've all done it, right? I mean, whether it's with DAX, whatever, we go to the internet search engine, your favorite search engine,
Being, of
and
course, right?
you basically, yeah. I mean, any developer that tells you they haven't used Stack Overflow is probably lying. But most of my stuff, most of my learning was from the Vega examples or from what other people have been doing. And I'm almost somebody that needs examples to start to understand context. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that approach. You can either start from the beginning and learn it properly and ultimately get frustrated that you're perhaps not seeing progress as fast because you're working on the fundamentals, or you can see something aspirational and maybe try and meet in the middle somewhere. And that's generally how I sort of work. I look at this really cool thing and I'm like, okay, I perhaps don't understand that, but let's change a couple things and see what that does.
Sure.
And that's what I quite like about Vega Lite. You can, if I were to do that with a proper custom visual, I'd have to build it and deploy it to my report. And I mean, it's a bit easier than that when you're developing, but it still feels like that sometimes.
Yeah.
Whereas you get immediate feedback on the screen, and you can gradually get there.
Yeah.
And now I only feel now that I'm able to really think about a design. So, for instance, I did something the other week where I figured out how to convert. I went back to my high school trigonometry and worked out how to convert Cartesian coordinates to polar coordinates. So I built a really basic radar chart, which theoretically isn't supported.
Okay.
But because there's all kinds of things around expressions and transforms, you can actually do that. And that opens up ideas as well. But I wouldn't be able to do that if I hadn't kind of got on that journey.
Yeah.
I'm only now feeling that when someone comes to me and says, how would I build this? I can actually put it all together.
That's nice. Yeah,
So it's
one
everyone's
day.
got their own learning path.
And actually, I completely agree. When I say go back to the start, my vision of the start is copying a more basic visualization. I would never even dream of like, let's go to the start and literally type the first thing. No, because I'm too impatient for that. And as you say, I just don't learn that way. I have to have something as a base, and I have to see some, because I'm impatient. I need to see something changing like straight away. Like I'm the sort of person who can never play a musical instrument because I'd have to pick up a guitar and like a week later play something totally awesome. I could never like just
Yeah.
like learn like, and so I'm going to have like 6 months of being garbage. I can't
Yeah,
do
and that's
that.
the thing with instruments, right? So I play instruments, but you can't take someone's awesome guitar solo and work backwards. You have to sort of develop the muscle memory and the understanding, at least a little bit. I don't have
Yeah.
great music theory knowledge,
Mm.
and I'll never be an amazing shredder, but it frustrated me that it took me ages to do some basic chords, and my brothers just sailed through. Everyone's
Yeah.
got their own
Okay.
different thing,
Yeah.
but I've got to a point with a guitar where I can pick it up and noodle away, and I'm pretty happy.
That's nice. I'll never be there.
And sometimes that's enough. Other
Yeah.
times there are people that are just rock stars of literally, um,
Mm.
and they're
Yeah.
just amazing, and you're always in awe of them.
Yeah. That's
And that's
true.
the thing that's just amazing about this community, right? There's just people that are so good at some things that you're just learning from all the time.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
and particularly now as Power BI is so like going back to the early days, Power BI was like so small you could be like, yeah, completed it, it's just so easy. And now it's kind of
yeah. Yeah. I get it.
now it's just so big. There's so many disciplines you need, and it's becoming a full stack where
Yeah.
it's hard to do it all. So there are just so many people that we can learn from,
Yeah.
and it's awesome.
I started using Power BI late 2016, early 2017, this time period. And I can remember thinking to myself, okay, this is cool because this is a tool I don't know. I'm going to learn it all. And then I'll learn it all. Then I'll be really good at it.
How's it going?
Naively not realizing that it was going to develop a lot faster because I'm used to this. I mean, it's like Excel, right? I mean, in generally, you see Excel. Obviously, you can't learn all about Excel because that's huge. But I mean, like generally, you see a program that's pretty much developed and doesn't develop quite as fast, But with Power BI, it develops and there's so many new features all the time. I never considered that was actually going to happen. So no, learning it all in
Yeah,
Power BI is not going to happen.
yeah, and Excel does everything as well. You got to remember that it's
Yeah,
you can do anything in Excel, right? I think last I
pretty
checked,
much.
I was able to do pretty much the stuff I've done in the past. VBA
You
has
can
a lot to answer for, I think.
you can do art in Excel. We watch people do this like Excel artwork. I'm like, how? I don't even comprehend. It's like, do you do that with the VLOOKUP? I don't know.
It's a
It's a
fun tool,
strange
but
thing.
again, it's got quite a long legacy as well, right? It's been around for a long time, so
Of
but
course,
they're
yeah.
still doing amazing things with it, right? You just saw the Lambda stuff and the new formula editors coming
Yeah,
out.
that's
It's
beautiful.
great. There's just so much life in it.
Yeah,
It's amazing.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I sometimes think regarding Power BI in the community, because obviously, as everyone says, we have a fantastic community and people are always willing to help. And I often wonder, is that because quite a few people kind of started their journey with Power BI and they kind of know how it feels to need to learn and need resources? Because I speak to quite a few people who, before they worked with Power BI, they were doing a completely different job. That they didn't come up through data. They didn't study this at university. And if you start off with nothing, you kind of know what it feels
I
like to need that support. I'm not sure.
People with better mindsets around it than me may be able to answer, but certainly from my perspective, I just felt more compelled to help others the more I got into Power BI. I don't know why. I think it's because there are some like I moved from for me the transition from SQL to DAX was really hard.
Okay.
And it still
Yeah.
sometimes trips me up. I'm a very, very, very I'm beating my own drum here, but I got receipts. I'm a pretty good SQL developer.
Okay. Cool.
I've done some quite incredible things because one of the companies I used to work at, they insisted everything had to be done a certain way. So we had to do some amazing things with SQL. Not necessarily good things, but technically quite impressive.
Okay.
Um, but DAX for me was a real head scratcher, and I still
Mm,
struggle with it sometimes because you just got to think a certain way. And
mm,
I would suck up any help I could get. So
mm,
obviously Marco and Alberto, um, you have
mm.
their site permanently open, but you Google something and there'd always be an answer from Owen on the community forums that would tell you exactly what you needed, or Phil Seamark had done something, or Resurad, another person. I'm not reeling off Kiwis, but deliberately, but
For me.
but you could just find that there'd be someone that had tried it and just felt that it was so perhaps necessary to stop other people having to go down that path. I just found it quite awesome. So that's kind of when I almost felt compelled to think, yeah, I've been coasting on SQL for years and gleaning help off people. But it's probably time to really start seeing if I can help. And there are a few things I was able to do, but mostly my contributions are in the background, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. I mean, not now, though. I mean, your contribution is basically creating this awesome visualization that it will definitely grow and become more and more used, right? I mean, that's a huge
Yeah, I mean,
that's a huge contribution, right?
I would love that. But I'm hoping it creates more content creators. You shouldn't be, like I say, previously, if a new visual came out, a developer would have to build it and they'd have to publish it and it would have to go through all the the necessary checks and balances. But there are just people that are so talented. Like Kerry's just popped up on the comments, but she's almost the first person. She probably is first person front of mind for me that just probably wouldn't really want to bother with. Not that she couldn't, because she's incredibly talented. Getting bogged down in that web development stuff, and just being able to get on with building something awesome. And we'll see. I think for me, that's more exciting than me being the person doing that. I'd rather give people the tooling, and that's probably what excites me the most.
I wouldn't want Kerry to get bogged down in development, because I think that would deprive the world of her awesome visualizations, and
I would completely agree.
The world needs those things, or at least I need them.
But certainly I'm not the best. Like I work hard to try and make my visuals good, but I don't think like that automatically.
Yeah.
And there are just people that are so much better at it. Not, particularly within DataViz, Twitter, and various other communities in general. You can get some amazing inspiration from places external to Power BI. And that's something that Jeff told me, was that, just follow other people that are, Tableau users or, other tools. You can learn a lot from them as well.
It's true. So I'm just going to throw out this question from Jeff. What can Microsoft do to help the Deneb grow the platform?
So this is what's happening, right? We're changing it every time. In short, I haven't really stopped to think about it. I do have some requests in with the visuals team. That's the people that develop the custom visuals frameworks, because we're very constrained by what custom visuals can do from a security perspective, quite rightly so.
Fair enough, yeah.
But I want a better editor in there, but I can't really do that because of technical reasons. So, for instance, the code editor that Visual Studio Code uses, which is called Monaco, Vega Editor uses that. It's really good. We can put better auto-completion in and have much more options around productivity.
The auto
but unfortunately,
sorry, I misunderstood. Which auto completion do you mean here?
So if you were to go and use Vega Editor, so if you go to the Vega documentation and click on an example, they have their own app called Vega Editor, and that uses Monaco, which is the Visual Studio Code editor component. You can actually put the whole the validation schema that we use for the language can be used for autocomplete. Not just measures and columns, but we can actually suggest marks and encoding channels and all this kind of stuff.
That would be cool.
It's really cool. So if you use that editor, that's a big gap between what Deneb can do and what the Vega editor does, which is one of the reasons why I just wanted to lift and shift it.
Sure, but I actually really enjoy in Deneb the auto suggest for when you have, as you say, for the columns and measures. But again, because I'm getting started, I forget like a mark, and I've got to go back to documentation to remember which mark is which.
Yeah, but
that'd be cool.
Yeah, it does. You should give it a try and just see what you like. But that's probably the one thing that I would really want to do. But there's just reasons. So custom visuals, without getting too into the detail, they're very, very heavily sandboxed, which means that they can't lazy load stuff. So once the visual's initialized, it can't easily. They can, if they're uncertified, load external resources. So this editor needs some stuff for the auto completion that we can't package, and that's probably the one thing that I'd really like. But they know that it's not I think to go back to Jeff's question, I think they're as helpful as they can be, given what they have to manage at the moment.
Yeah, fair enough.
Of course, if they have any ideas, I would love to hear them. But I find them pretty good to deal with. That particular team are great.
Yeah, I was interested that they have the same. They have to jump through the same hoops themselves, essentially. that there are certain of their own visualizations have to go through exactly the same processes, which it's good
Yeah,
to know.
anything that's third party, I can't imagine how much fun we would have as vendors or providers if there was a way to shortcut that. And I think it's nice that they don't do that,
Hmm. Hmm.
because it really does show that the certification process, is equitable, right?
Yeah.
But it's another reason why perhaps visuals like, I can't speak for the internal discussions or anything because I don't know,
Yeah.
but a visual like Jiglet Slicer, which is certified, which is the third party visual, you can have images on that.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
I think you can load those from the web,
Yeah.
but that might have been before certification put that rule in. And now that rule is there, you may not be able to update that visual with the same functionality,
Yeah. Okay.
which is why it's perhaps seems to be stalled for a bit. There's
Hmm.
some visuals that got in the early days that get this functionality that since they probably couldn't recertify.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So it's an interesting, and it's a moving feast all the time. Every time I submit my visuals, if they're certified, you have to really check the rules because they may change.
Hmm. Fair
So
enough.
it's quite tricky.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Uh,
The project, or the projects, the ideas that I have using with Deneb, they kind of just come and go. I'll go. I mean, as I said before, the documentation is awesome. I just go to the website and I'll click on a random visualization that looks interesting to me, and I'll try and to see how I can reproduce that. The one thing that I've completely failed to do thus far, I had mentioned this 2 weeks ago, but I haven't come any further. I haven't tried it yet. Is maps. For some reason, I can't make a map work. I just don't. It really
Maps,
upsets me.
from my end, I don't have a lot of support for it because I don't like them, and that's Power BI's fault.
Fair
Because
enough.
I used to love maps until Power BI, and now I don't like maps because um, they just, they don't work so well.
I
Like
don't.
I'm from the days of, like, say, with SQL Server and all these other kind of back end
Mm,
dimensional modeling stuff we used to build,
mm,
and SQL Server has amazing spatial data type support,
yeah.
and that just doesn't work in Power BI. So I got pretty fed up pretty quickly, and fortunately now you got James Dale's doing icon maps, so I'm getting a bit more excited about maps again.
I agree. I don't like maps in Power BI. The only time I found a map acceptable in Power BI is if it's actually done by Discover AI, because their maps are just phenomenal. I love how they do maps.
No, they're
Um,
great. I mean, I get to see that work
yeah,
internally, and Alice is
I
great
can
with
imagine.
maps. She really she's able to bring so much out of them,
Yeah.
and it's good because I'm we have projects, and she does the mapping because I'm not. We kind of laugh that I'm not even remotely interested in doing maps, um, but she does them really really well.
Nice. Yeah, it's a fantastic.
Um,
One of my least favorite things I see on a report is like a map where each size of the dot is like the size of the net sales. I'm like, why? It doesn't mean anything. Put in a bar chart. You know what I mean?
it's
Really
hard
don't
to
like maps.
find. Yeah, I mean, putting data points on maps is quite hard. Um, It- yeah, but I mean, going back to, I mean, I don't know if your question was specifically about Deneb versus maps, but it's quite challenging to have a certified visual and load that stuff in.
Yeah.
So if you get I think on the website we do I say think, I know because I go through the effort of building it. Just can't help but be vague. We do a standalone version that isn't certified, and you can load GeoJSON layers from websites and things like that.
Uh-huh.
And the examples do work if the websites let you load them. That's another thing with custom visuals that you got to bear in mind.
Interesting.
Um, I'm trying to think about ways to mitigate that inside Deneb, maybe through custom formatting or something like that.
Okay.
Conditional formatting.
Yeah.
Um, Conditional formatting is tricky because you have to know exactly what you need in the visual, and Deneb's flexible.
Mm.
So I'm kind of mooting an idea in my own head about, could we have a measure-based GeoJSON that's loaded from the model that could work. I'm always spinning these ideas in my head. So it's
Cool.
not, and that should still work in a certified way because it's
Yeah.
not loading any data from the visual.
Okay.
So,
Mm, mm.
maps, I wouldn't say maps are second class citizens. I just don't have as much experience with them in those tools.
It's fair enough. Yeah.
And I would certainly, and somebody has raised an issue around this, and I would encourage anyone that wants stuff for Deneb to create issues in the GitHub repository, because it's hard to kind of know what people want unless I get
Mm,
it in that one place.
yeah.
But yeah, it's I think we'll see some cool stuff. I've
It's
definitely reproduced some of the examples on the site. Like there's a London Tube map that I've
yeah,
done in there, but
yeah,
it takes some effort.
yeah, for sure. But again, it's for me, it's fun effort anyway. So it's you learn something as you do it. One second, can you please? I'm going to pull up a question up here. I haven't read it yet, so it might be the most random question. Can you please explain what should and shouldn't be included in the config tab? Aha, that's a good question. I like that one.
It is a
If
good question. I mean, you don't have to use it.
yeah,
When we template, we consolidate the whatever's in the config tab we put into a config section. So if you were to edit the spec, if you were to edit it all in the spec tab, when we import the template, we split that into the config tab, which I don't know if that's a good thing or not. I should probably put a check mark for that. But honestly, it's up to you. I don't think there's any really hard and fast rules. I personally use it for styling marks. So the stuff I put in 1.1, which is a whole kind of predefined Power BI theme that I contributed to the Vega themes tool. That's like how close can we get generically to make the visuals look like they do in Power BI. I would say anything cosmetic can go in there. I don't really have, the thing is, I don't really have rules on Canvas as should. Config, you can't put dynamic binding stuff in there. But sometimes you can. It's part of some of the quirks of the language. For instance, if you were to get fancy with access label expressions, where you conditionally format access labels based on certain things, they work in config, but conventionally they might not if it was for a mark. It's a feature of the language I perhaps don't fully.
Okay.
I don't have a best practice. Basically, this is what happens. You ask me a question and I just ramble. I should say it depends.
It depends.
That's the answer du jour.
It's good to ramble and then say depend, because it feels like if you say depend, it's like you're brushing it off, but you
Yeah,
tried. And but that
don't have to
update,
be
the
that stuff, it depends.
1.1, they really packed out the config, right? Because previously there was just a little bit, and then I noticed that there was a big pile.
Yeah,
That was quite cool. Quite cool.
We were presenting, I think Carrie and I were presenting at, it was the Austin user group, and Alpa from Microsoft was there, and he was quite excited about the theme capability. So I knew that Vega had a themes tool. So I thought, I wonder if I could contribute a Power BI one. So I basically had a look at that, and then I thought, oh, this could be a pretty good boilerplate for Deneb as well.
Yeah.
And obviously, I had that in mind, but I just thought, if you want it, it's there. If you don't, get rid of it.
But also
it's just a way of helping you understand just how much you can customize.
Yeah, exactly. What I was going to say, like having it there makes you see what can be done. And again, it's just another thing to play with if you don't know. Like if you change some values, you can see precisely what's happening. Whereas if that config is very empty, like it was previously, you have to do so much of that work on your own. That's like hours and hours of work to understand all of that. So it's
and I
great
think
to have it change.
Much like I was saying about how visuals, you need to rely on me as a developer to give you the functionality you want. It's almost like I perhaps need to do a better job of leading people to some functionality within the Vega languages, which is why that kind of came about. And the idea was to have those inbuilt templates, and there's not many of them.
Yeah.
But we could build those out. So if we get some good templates, if people want to suggest templates to go in, I'm very happy to take those as issue requests as well. We don't want to put loads in because they pack the visual out and the visual gets bigger. But I mean, it's only about 1.5 megabytes, which is pretty good. And most of that's the Vega language stuff. But I'm always happy to take suggestions on this stuff. It's a community tool. So at the minute, I'm really program managing it, but I'm happy for other people to have a say. I may have the final say, but I'm happy for them to have a say.
That's fair,
because
I think, mate. Now
it's everyone's tool now.
I get the impression that you have very high standards for yourself. You say things like, "I should do a better job of this," where you're doing a very awesome job. I think no one's gonna deny that. So.
If you ever employ me, you'll probably regret it, because I'm one of these people that cannot let something go out, and I think it's because I started my career doing quality assurance and software testing.
Okay.
And I did a lot of that for a number of years, and I understood just like it's very easy as a tester to chuck stuff over to a developer and go, it's broken. And it's hard to, as a developer, it's hard to think like a tester as well, because you're so focused on code that you can't often put a different hat on and test it objectively. So it was always a fun time, testers versus developers, but you start to appreciate when you wear those hats just how hard each one has it. In terms of what they have to do. Testers have to focus a lot on quality. Developers have to try and preempt that, but at the same time, there's lots of technical reasons why they may struggle and why bugs get introduced. And I have sadly introduced a couple of bugs into 1.1 that I'm not perhaps proud of. But if there's one thing you can accuse me of, it's taking far too long to release something, because everything has to be as perfect as it can be, because I don't know. I know what it's like to test code and I used to take that code out to the people using it as well, right? So if it broke, I was the person getting yelled at by, I used to work for, you'll know these. I used to work for Argos, right?
Okay.
Nice. So Argos are a UK retailer, for those that don't know. A lot of stores, very complex retail operations. And if we used to break something, it wasn't life and death, but it made a lot of difference to the company's bottom line. So if we put something in the point of sale that basically ceased trading, we would lose millions of pounds very quickly. So when you put software out and you're in a store and you're the person representing that whole effort, and you've got people that can't work and customers yelling at them, that's not fun. So you want to avoid that stuff, and I know Deneb's an open source tool and you get what you pay for, but I want you to try and get value for money.
Yeah, that's fair. Makes sense. Nice, very interesting, mate. It's it's one thing to sit and use it every day and to play with it and learn stuff. To hear about the thought process behind it is quite cool, to be honest, because obviously I don't get a chance to do that very often. And when I hear you talk, it's really cool. It's really in depth about how you do this, how you do that, but actually the explaining your journey it's quite a cool thing to learn.
Yeah, it's actually fun to talk about. I actually don't get to vent much, so it's quite nice. Realize I've probably got some issues to work out.
Pull this question up here because that's something I would like to talk about as well. What's the best way to learn Vega Lite? To get.
Can I tell you when I get there?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, from my side, someone who is currently learning it, and I'm obviously still pretty basic level. It depends, of course, on how you learn. For me, I do think that the Vega Lite documentation that you'll find, and also you said yourself. I mean, what I love about it is there are so many examples, but not just that you have the examples. The editor that you mentioned is fantastic because just the mouse hover overs, which explains in quite a detailed level what every single element is doing, the marks, the layering, all that kind of stuff. So I would, for me, someone who's actually on that journey, starting, of course, at the documentation and spending time playing with it and reading it and editing yourself is a good start. To expert level, I have no idea because I'm still far away from that.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily regard myself as that either, but I mean, all I can really say is I can offer you my perspective is I started much like Ben's saying, start with the documentation. The difference we have is the more people that use it and contribute to the community, people like Carrie, people like Jose, people like Ben, other people, there's numerous other people that are, I'm not deliberately leaving people out, but these are just people that I know I'm actively talking to on a regular basis. Those examples will help. I should mention Greg, actually. I haven't mentioned Greg. Greg Phelps is, I don't know if he's still here, but Greg's doing a lot of work on Enterprise DNA's site to do a showcase of Deneb templates. So if you're an Enterprise DNA member, there's a section of their forum now specifically for Deneb templates, which is really cool.
That's cool.
And Greg's doing heaps and heaps of work there. So I had something in my head saying you're missing somebody. And there it is. But how did we get good at DAX? How did we get good at M? Some people have to blaze trails. We're on the back foot a little bit with the visual layer because we don't have 5 or 6, actually, several years of Marco and Alberto's knowledge and other people in that space that are just so good at it. We will get there. So that's the best way to get good, as the meme says, is practice. For me, I'm fortunate that I don't just develop the tool; I get to actually build with it as well, and that teaches me a lot as well. But there's so many different ways to build something. It's quite open ended, much like data modeling. You can do data modeling all kinds of different ways. It's very contextual. But that documentation, the Vega developers, it's brilliant.
Yeah, it is.
It has helped me instrumentally, and hopefully, as a community, we'll start to elevate each other. That's what my utopian view is for for a tool like this is to give people the tooling and the visual layer that we get with Pro, DAX, and M, that kind of thing. That's
Kind of like
not full-on web development.
visualization socialism or something.
Yeah, why not? Let's try and figure out what that sounds like. But yeah, practice is the short answer.
Yeah, I mean, for me, with Power BI, I've always said that if you want to learn, have like a goal in mind. Whereas actually with Vega Lite, it's the opposite. I'd rarely have a goal in mind. I'll look on the website, look at the documentation, see what I can do, and then just like change stuff, and then see what it does, and then actually reduce it. If I go in with something, we talked before about a basic bar chart. If you go in with something that's more complex with a basic bar chart, I actually like to work backwards to see what I can remove that will make it still work. So I know what elements are controlling what, and then put them back in to see what it does. That kind of stuff, So
yeah, I was working on something the other day, and I found a whole bunch of stuff that I put in there and didn't take out, but it wasn't really doing anything, but it just wasn't necessary. So sometimes you can even do that as well. There can be some artifacts left that just don't do anything anymore. And that doesn't help either. So it's almost like you need some kind of linter, as we call them in programming, to find the bits that aren't needed. Maybe one day. I got so much to do and only so many hours in the week. But we'll get there. We'll keep chipping away at it. It's going to get better for sure.
I mean, it's already in a fantastic place as it is.
I'm glad.
But, yeah, it is. If in the documents, it would be cool if in denim documentation people could grab templates created by the community. This is what you're saying, right? I mean,
totally agree with you.
Yeah, you have some already. Actually, where you actually download it.
Yeah, there are some in the visual. So the thing is it's for me it's a bandwidth thing. I don't have bandwidth to curate and develop a repository for templates.
Okay.
It is a lot of work, and it's just not something I can focus on.
Okay.
I agree that templates are quite essential. And there are some people I'm speaking with at the minute that are trying to remedy that.
Okay.
So there may be the ability to get stuff more centrally in future. We'll see how things go. But again, this might be something that's more of a call to the community to see if we can find something. I mean, I think I've said a couple of times on socials that if anyone wants to do that, I'm quite happy to help them get there. Because I think, finding templates, discovering templates is great. But it's more about how we can make them easy to get and integrate. And that's hard with a certified visual, for instance. Like we couldn't connect to a website and pull templates in, but we want to make somebody that knows more about content distribution than me could probably help with that.
I'm probably missing something completely here, but from my side, a template could be just simple as like the actual text that goes in, right? I mean, if you have a text file
very simple
that you just paste in, like someone's mentioned, I think Steve there mentioned GitHub. So if in GitHub you have loads of text files and just paste.
Well, to name drop, Mike Carlo from Power BI Tips has a repository he's building.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So he's shared that. He's shared that on a couple of places. I don't have the URL handy, but Mike's having a look at that, for instance. So there are some templates in there. I don't know if there's going to be. It's also more around how we can see what they look like and that kind of thing. And there's all kinds of things around that. So with templates, again, it's very contextual. It's for your data. You may not want to have a preview image of that template because your data is potentially sensitive.
Yeah.
So do you want to have a bar chart with all of your stores on, or, as a preview image for a template so someone else can know what it means?
Yeah.
Or, there's all kinds of weird things to think about.
Yeah.
So again, I'm building things into the tool to help with that, but it's just not something I have the capacity to manage.
Fair enough.
So yeah, I think some people have talked to me about the idea of doing it, and I will support them. And I will link to it from the website and that kind of thing. And yeah, Greg's re-highlighting what I talked about with Enterprise DNA. They have that as well. They have a forum, and Greg produces a lot of collateral around that as well, right? He doesn't just put a template up. He's got a sample workbook. He's got often a video.
Nice.
And other things. So he puts a lot of effort into those. I'm not saying everybody else doesn't, but as a place to look for templates with more information around what the template does, Greg puts a lot into that. Kerry writes blog posts. Jose's got videos.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be great if we could synergize that, to quote lovely business buzzwords. Again, I'm happy to contribute to that discussion, but it's just not
Yeah.
something I,
Sure.
basically, if you want me to build a visual to give you what you need and continue moving
Mm.
along, I'll get nothing done
Of course.
if
Yeah.
I'm focusing on that.
Yeah.
Because I've weighed it up, and for me, it's, I'd say it's a full-time job, but it basically is. At the minute, I'm
Of course.
probably
Yeah.
putting half of a full-time job into just moving Deneb along.
Yeah. Yeah. I think most of my templates are in my Stream Deck. To be honest, just one page in my Stream Deck is just all Vega
You
lights.
have changed my life with that. I didn't even think about that. Um,
Yeah, I
so
love it.
I've got some webinars coming up. Excuse me, I've got some webinars coming up where I'm going to automate a lot of that stuff because talking and typing is really hard.
I hate it. Yeah, it's so much nicer just to press that button and watch it all happen. And then when you did make that change to make it all kind of type nice and slowly, not just that manic way that I did, yeah, it's cool. So yeah, get a
It
Stream
looks
Deck.
very awesome. And because we have keystrokes for pretty much everything inside Deneb, because we have keyboard shortcuts for most things,
Right.
it's quite easy to do the tidy up and various other things, which is
Yeah.
quite cool.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy about that. But
Nice.
yeah, you've
Nice.
given me a lot to think about as well. So you see, I say I don't have time for templates, but I'm going to put some time into automating my content a bit more, which is quite cool. So I'm really grateful for that. That's just something. It was like you did it. And I'm like, what the hell why didn't I think of that? That's amazing.
Like I said, I did it with Dax a while ago, and when I started doing stuff with Vega, I thought it just makes sense. Just want to bring something from Jeff. He put the link. Actually, I've noticed that in previous weeks when people put in links, they never show up. I think there's something I need to change, that all links are automatically hidden. So I apologize for that. But I'll try and get all the links that
I
were mentioned.
will. I will try and furnish Ben with that link shortly, and maybe he's able to attach it to the comments on the video or something.
Yeah, good point. I'll do that. I should do that. Good
But
point.
yeah, Mike is kind of scraping the web for templates he knows about.
Mm,
So there is a GitHub repository he's doing.
okay.
So yeah, I mean, it's early days. I think there's a long way for us to go.
Yeah, completely loads.
But we can, as a community, we can pull together and do something awesome.
Love it. All right, mate. Let's leave it at that. It's been a nice long chat. I've enjoyed every minute of it,
Yeah, it's
and
been lovely. It's been great coming on. Thank
I
you.
think thank you for joining us and talking about all the fantastic work that you've been doing. It's a pleasure
I
to
could
work with.
probably keep going.
I feel like you're going to lose your voice in a few minutes as well. I'm a bit
Yeah,
concerned
it's
for you.
getting there, isn't it? I
Yeah,
keep drinking water more frequently, but
yeah.
yeah, this is kind of what happens. Got terrible lungs.
Oh man. Anyway,
Um,
oh,
can I just address that last question
absolutely.
that
Which is the
Steve's
one
put
from
up real
Steve.
quick?
Absolutely, go for
Steve
it,
has
man.
put when writing Vega Light, does autocode and written matter? Um,
Mm,
I will lead out with it depends. When you're doing things like transforms, yes, because sometimes if you write calculations, if you're doing a calculated column, for instance, in a layer or something like that, you can reference a field after it's been created. But I don't know if Vega resolves that. That's something I habitually do. So I guess the answer there is experiment. But it's quite good at resolving things. Sometimes it gets upset if you put parameters in the wrong layer, for instance, with things like interactivity, that kind of thing. So sometimes you have to tweak
yeah,
that. But I think generally, considering how flexible it is, it does a really good job.
yeah. Yeah, I've
But
noticed
yeah,
one or two things where I've had to change. I've tried to change the order just to see, and it didn't work. So okay, so that part kind of has to come above there, just to. So
yeah,
as you
and
said,
there are things we need
experiment.
to
Yeah.
do as well to expose those kind of errors to people more easily,
Mm.
and that's something I'm working on. May not
Cool.
be for a bit, but there's a lot of productivity stuff I want to put into the tool to help people with debugging and understanding what's happening. So the Vega editor has some really neat stuff, and I'd like to try and get some of that in, and
Nice.
we'll get there.
Absolutely. Well, as with all things, we'll get there.
We
And
will.
fantastic, cool stuff. Anyway, thank you everyone for your questions. It's been great to have another chat with you all. Of course, thank you, mate, for joining today. It's been very
Thank you,
insightful,
and
very
I'll be
helpful.
back next week in the audience.
You're a gentleman. Absolutely love it. Um, Goodbye, everyone. Take care, and see you next Thursday.